Here we are relating inverse functions to real-life problems. We have a study that says the relation between the total amount of time students spend studying material for their final exam and their test grade is modeled by this T of X. So X is the amount of time studying Spanish in hours, and T, we're looking at their test score. So you would assume probably the more amount of time they spend studying, probably the higher their test score is. And so we can interpret those variables to start. So you plug in X, and it says X is in hours. So this is hours studying. So X is measuring our time studying in hours. And then this capital T stands for our test grade. And of course, that is the same thing as the Y value. So tell me how many hours you've studied, and I can tell you what your test grade would be. We're going to use it to relate the other way around. We're going to find the inverse of this capital T. I'm going to start by replacing that T of X with just a Y equals 55 plus 17 times the natural log of X. Now I'm going to switch my X's and my Y's. So X equals 55 plus 17 ln of Y, and solve for Y. So first of all, I'm going to subtract 55 from both sides. So I have X minus 55 equals 17 times the natural log of Y. I want to get Y by itself, so I don't want that to be multiplied with 17. I want to get rid of that multiplying by 17 by dividing by 17. So I get X minus 55 divided by 17 is the natural log of Y. I want to get it out of the natural log. If I wanted to get it out of log base 2, I'd raise both sides from base 2. If I want to get rid of log base 7, I'd raise both sides from base 7. But here I have ln, which is log base e. So I'm going to raise both sides from base e to get it out of there, cancel it out. And now we have our Y equals on one side by itself. And we're going to label that as our inverse function. So instead of Y equals, I'm going to call it T inverse of X is e to the X minus 55 divided by 17. So the inverse of having 55 plus 17 times ln of X, both 55 and 17 are outside and they're multiplied with ln of X, is having e with X minus 55 divided by 17 on the inside. So there's our inverse function, which is going to work the other way. So with my inverse, I'm going to plug in test grades and get out hours studied. That's going the other way for the inverse function. Since the original function, you put in time, you get out test grades. Here we're going to put in test grades and get out the time spent studying. So we're going to use this to evaluate T inverse of 95 and explain what that means in a sentence. So I have T inverse of 95, which is going to be e to the 95 minus 55 divided by 17. Which gives me, I might need to put this in parentheses depending upon my calculator. Probably the easiest way to type this into any calculator, let's do 95 minus 55. Let's do e to the 40 over 17, just so we all get the same exact answer. And so we would get about 10.5. And we're going to interpret this in a sentence. So we're going the other way. We're plugging in the test grade and getting out the hours studied. So a student that scored a 95 on the final exam studied about 10 and a half hours. There's our final answer. We plugged in a 95 grade. They're going to need to study for 10 and a half hours to get that 95. Or in other words, to score 95, they likely studied 10 and a half hours for that final exam.